This is my first video about language learning. I decided to actually learn a language in 2026 instead of just buying a bunch of books that I end up not reading. I haven't learned a language yet, so I'm not an authority. You shouldn't be taking advice from me, but I'm putting this video out there now so that months later, when I get a little further along, I'll have a benchmark to compare it to. Maybe you'll find some of what I am doing interesting. So the short version is I'm learning Spanish entirely through reading a novel in Spanish that I would be happy to read in English, and that's it. I'm not doing flashcards. I'm not studying vocabulary. I'm not doing anything that I would consider to be studying or hard. I'm just enjoying myself, reading a novel for pleasure, and that's it. That's the very short version of the story. I'm reading a Jack Reacher book by Lee Child, one of my favorite authors, and I'm using an app that lets me read it and translate as little or as much as I need to get through the book. And that just makes it pretty seamless. According to the app, I now know 2,653 Spanish words. That might be true, but not know, but recognize. If I'm reading the book and I see those words, I can understand the sentences. If I were to actually try to have a conversation, I'm sure I would not be able to think of most of those words, and I do not know verb tenses, future, past, stuff like that. So this is only my first month. I started somewhere around the beginning of January, but I didn't do it every day because I traveled a bit, so let's call it 3 weeks, just to be fair. I did come into it with a little bit of Spanish knowledge. So I grew up in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, which is largely Hispanic population, went to high school, middle school, with a lot of Puerto Rican, Dominican, other Spanish-speaking natives. My best friend in high school was Cuban. I hung out with him and his family at their house and at their business. And so I picked up some words, even though they spoke English to me. But let's just, to be fair, say that I might have known a few hundred Spanish words and maybe a few sentences, and obviously some of your major profanities, obviously, before I started this. But I did take Spanish 1 and Spanish 2 twice each in high school, which means I failed them both at least once. So that tells you how much I knew there. My plan is to try to get to basic fluency, which I'm considering a B2 level, within 6 months. I think that should be pretty easy to do. Doing nothing but reading. I am going to listen to podcasts and watch movies. I watched 2 movies last weekend, Home Alone and Groundhog Day, in Spanish, no subtitles or anything. And I probably understood about half or so. Same thing with listening to a Spanish language podcast. I probably understand about half of it. And I am not going to worry about speaking for a while until I feel like I'm 95% fluent reading, because reading is so much easier. You can reread the same thing multiple times. You can reread it at any speed. And when native speakers are speaking, sometimes they run words together, so it's much easier in print to tell where one word ends and the next one begins. So that's pretty handy. I started on this because for years I have wanted to learn Japanese. And I have a literal bookshelf, entire bookshelf, full of novels, study guides, manga, vocabulary, children's books, dictionaries, short stories, various things of that nature. And I did try to use some of them. I found it very difficult. I did use Anki. I learned hiragana. I learned katakana. I learned a few kanji, some basic words, but it always felt like work. And every time I actually tried to read anything in Japanese or watch anime and try to pick out some of the words, or whatever, I realized that I really didn't know anything. So I thought, why not take a little detour and pick up what should be the easiest language in the world for me to learn, just because I had some background with, some words and basic vocabulary. And I decided to use Spanish, and I decided to use an app called Link, which I have a lot of problems with. It has a lot of features that I think are worthless. It's missing a couple of what I think are super basic features that make it very hard to use, but I just use a couple of the features of it, and I also am a programmer and have been for 25 years, so I might make my own tool to replace it and just make it very simple and do exactly what I need it to do. I'll demo that so that you can see what I'm talking about. So this is the app, and I use only this mode, the sentence mode. It shows a sentence. Here's a shorter sentence. All the words that I don't know or have not told it I know are highlighted. And if I decide to say I know it, like this word, voices, it goes away. And it shows only the words I don't know, so I can read the Spanish. And if I want a full translation, I can touch that. And for the most part, I can just read all the sentences without needing any of the full translation. I can mostly understand it or completely understand it, or just looking at the individual words will tell me what I don't know. And a lot of the times if I don't know, it's because there are idioms that I'm not familiar with, or a word that I am familiar with is being used in a way I haven't seen it used before. So, like I said, this is a benchmark video. I was partially inspired to do this by the YouTuber Evil Dia, who does language videos on YouTube, and he has been learning Spanish using something called Dreaming Spanish, which only allows him to listen to native content and not learn any vocabulary, not read, not look anything up. And he is doing it as an experiment to prove that that is not a good way to learn a language. He's been spending about 3 hours a day for over a year, and I think within a few months I will far surpass him. And that's not because I'm better than him. I will be better than him in Spanish because he is intentionally preventing himself from doing what needs to be done. And this is his fourth language, so I think he knows what he's talking about when it comes to language learning, although he does not recommend the path I'm taking, which is a reading-only approach. So we'll see what happens there. So since I'm over 2,600 words, I don't think that means I'll be over 5,000 words next month, even though I'll probably do as much or more reading this month because I don't know how much vocabulary I'm going to run across in just my fiction books that I'm reading. But I am looking forward to my progress, and I have probably ill-advisedly started using Link for 3 other languages also, Japanese, Croatian, and Esperanto. I have reasons for each one. I'll explain at some future video. I don't want to make this one too long. Right now, I'm only spending 5 or 10 minutes a day on each of them. I don't believe it's possible to learn 4 languages at once, at least not for me. But what I'm hoping is that in 6 months or a year, when I feel like my Spanish is fluent, or maybe I've even taken a certification, that I will be able to pick one of those languages and do what I'm doing now with that language, having a few hundred words of base vocabulary to build on, instead of it just being complete gibberish, which it pretty much feels like right now. So that's the plan. Like I said, this video is just for reference so that a month, 2 months, 6 months from now, I can see a comparison. And if you're interested, you can follow along. Talk to you next time.